your host, Cambria Kelly of the Chicago Board and WBEZ's Richest Deal.
You found the Barbershop Show on Vocalo 89.5 FM and Vocalo.org. I'm your host, Cambria Kelly, and with me is my co-host,
Hello, hello, great to be here. And this is, what a time for Chicago. We're going to talk about that today.
It's a good show. This is going to be a good show. I told my friends who are outside Chicago, live stream at Vocalo.org. Check it out. Every month, we like to check in with our favorite local journalists and bloggers. We include them in there for a segment that we call Shop and Talk. We get their perspective on the stories of the day, and then they tell us about developments in local news that they kind of liked, the ones that they disliked, best part of the day.
Yeah.
Lastly, they tell us those moments that made them go, WTF. We cannot say that. I'll probably get fined, but you know what we're talking about.
Okay, today we're joined at the shop by blogger and political consultant Kyle Pilgrim. Kyle, how you doing? Very happy to hear it. Also with us is Emmett Moore, a writer for Extra newspaper, follow the Barbershop Show.
Thank you for having me.
And also with us is Suzanne McBride of Columbia College and the Austin Talks blog. And we want to welcome all of you to the show today. It's January and 2012 is still very fresh. This is only, what, today's the 20th, so we're just into it. Around the new year, there's a feeling of change in the air, and in Chicago, change is always consistent, right?
In the neighborhoods now.
Everything changes. The layout of the city's wards has just changed. Top of the news, you saw people going, oh, I can't believe it. So we'll talk about that today. Every 10 years, in light of the new census data, the city council has to remap Chicago's 50 wards. They take into account the population gains and losses. In this case, losses of 180,000 people. 25,000 increase in Latinos, and as well as the racial ethnic makeup of the parts of the city. Then they try to draw boundaries that fairly represent Chicago's diverse demographics. Okay, Dan. Now, when it comes to fairly representing Chicago's diversity,
I like that boss. Fairly.
The Black Caucus and the Latino Caucus struggled to draft a map that pleases both groups. Yesterday, the city council approved a new ward map. The vote was like 41 to 9. And, that's what you needed, so that there couldn't be any argument about it.
It's a huge thing, and Asians kind of
got it done, didn't he?
He got it done. You know, some people are still complaining, and Asians are still a little bit lost in there. Their population grew in Chicago as well. So we talked about that before. But obviously, this is a major breaking local news story. If you're into politics, you're interested in that. All our guests today follow Chicago Ward Remapping saga, and I want to get their perspectives on that. So, Kyle, I mean, you're an outspoken person. I mean, what were you thinking?
Well, I mean, first correction, it was 41 to 8. No one did show up. But the
who didn't show up?
And it doesn't matter.
I know.
It didn't matter. It's the 41.
Okay,
Right?
41.
But no, actually, when you look at the way it was divided up, and last time we talked about it, we were talking about like how would this work? How, you know, when you lose 181,000 voters, that's a lot. And to look and say that the Black Caucus only lost one ward, and that's amazing. It's amazing. So you want to talk about the winners? Clearly the winners of the Black Caucus. There's no question when you look at this map. When you lose 181,000 voters and you only lose one influence ward, that's a pretty successful remap.
Do you think that was fair?
Doesn't matter if it's fair. Doesn't matter. This is fair. No, actually I wrote about this in my Huffington Post blog yesterday. You know, there's a great Twitter exchange I had with an individual, or rather an individual. And they were talking about moving to Rogers Park, and they said, "Well, is Rogers Park bad? I hear it's bad." And the person said, "Well, it's North Side bad. It's not Inglewood bad." And so
that's terrible. Okay.
But no, actually, I think it's you might think it's terrible, but the thing is, the reality of it is when you look at the demographics, when you look at the crime rates, when you look at the economic standpoint, when you look at what the community needs are. When you're talking about Austin, when you're talking about Inglewood, you're talking about communities that might need more assistance, that have been neglected in the past. And so when I look at this remapping,
also known as the Black community.
Yes.
Which is
needs more resources.
You could also extend that to the back of the yards. You could expand it to some other neighborhoods too. But the net point of it is it fair? And when I look at it and go, well, it's probably not fair that you know, North Side is going to pick up 9,000 voters versus somewhere on the South Side it might be 5,000 less. But those communities need more needs, so I'm okay with it.
Evan, what about you?
Well, it's definitely a polarizing topic. You know, you see, I can understand where the Black caucuses are coming from, because you can see how the population has shifted in the city. For instance, a lot of African Americans have left the city to go to the suburbs, they move out of state. There's also a lot of people also moved out of public housing. That takes away votes because a lot of those segment people got shifted to the suburbs. Also, I can see where Latino caucus is coming from, the fact that Latinos are the largest growing minority in the city and also in the country. You can see how they want more representation to just reflect diversity in the city.
Were you surprised that the Black wards only lost one ward?
I kind of has two schools of thought on that, because a lot of the people that kept their wards also are some of the same people that have been around for years. You know, even since the council board, some of the people still around. And also those people who are aldermen now, like Austin Burnett, who's sadly Jesse White. That's go way back to something with Jesse White, but put together and you see how far that goes back, and people in terms of patronage and such. I'm also I'm really surprised about it.
Well, also you have to consider that you got a vote of 41. That means some people call to the office, co-opted. It makes sense to vote on that based on their individual concerns about themselves.
But that didn't happen. They
I know. It was
not here.
Roger Sawyer was the freshman.
He didn't vote.
He was still.
Yeah.
Well, needless to say.
Oh, he cast no vote. I'm sorry. Roderick, Fioretti, Zalewski, Chandler, Waxback.
Yeah, Sawyer voted because he voted against it. He was he voted against it. Susan McBride, Norfolk College, Austin blog, Austin Talks blog. So, what do you think? What happened?
Well, I'm not surprised what happened, because when you have people who are drawing the lines for their own benefit, what happens is neighborhoods get broken apart. And what I would have liked to have seen, and I'll remain hopeful for 10 years from now, is that we actually have more independent, objective drawers come in and actually come up with 50 wards that actually represent individual neighborhoods. Austin still has 4 aldermen representing it. And you go across I think there's like 5 different aldermen who touch parts of Lincoln Park. And if the idea behind bringing neighborhoods together and improving neighborhoods across the city is in fact a goal for everyone, and I would hope it would be, then that is what should be driving redistricting, not keeping people's safe seats.
So let me throw this question out there. I mean, obviously there could be lawsuits that come from this, and it'll probably happen. But what's the likeliness that any of them will be successful?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the way this thing was negotiated, the Latino caucus and the African American caucus, and you see how it was negotiated, you also saw ways that lawsuits could happen. And I think they're well positioned to make a lawsuit happen. Whether it's successful or not, I'm not really confident, because of how many votes that they were able to get onto this in both caucuses. If it would have been 41-8 and it was almost all Latino caucus, I think you would have had a better MALDIF argument. But there's no question that MALDIF, working with the Asian community, has an argument. Whether or not they take it to court, we'll have to see.
Well, one of the questions that I have is whether or not you think something that the Tribune editorial said, I think a few days before this, maybe a week before this vote came, and they said to some degree it might have been a better idea for the thing to go to a referendum and have several plans and let people vote on it. I mean, what you always see are quoted are the amounts of money it would cost to do that. But they said in checking with the Board of Elections, actually that process would only cost $100,000. The $20,000 to $30,000 is the cost of lawsuits. So what do you think about that? Let the people decide kind of approach.
You're asking me. Yeah.
Looking directly at Kyle.
Yeah, let the people decide, but that's not how redistricting works. I mean, redistricting is about incumbent protection first, and then community involvement as well, and second. So when you're talking about a redistricting process, there's no way that they were going to allow this to go to the public. The outcome is not guaranteed.
What,
whereas
20 years ago? Or 1990?
They had no choice.
We've had a much different outcome than what we had this week.
Yeah, actually, I think so. I think the Latino caucus map had a chance to actually win out in a general in a referendum. I think we would have found ourselves in a lot of lawsuits following that, but I think they actually had a better chance, particularly on the north side.
I do think that they're probably more likely to have litigation, but in the end, I'm not convinced that there would have been even that many maps put up on a referendum. I mean, in theory, it's a nice idea to have more direct democratic involvement, but, you know, who actually sets the agenda for we voters to decide, you know, it could appear to be transparent, but not really having much of that.
Alderman Fiorello was on our sister station, WBEZ this morning. He's hot. He was not pleased about the outcome of that. Of course, he's in the second ward, and which is primarily south, and it's near Loop, but now it's changed. It's going to be like mid-north. So he's not real happy about that. And again, you know, this doesn't take effect until 2015, but with some of these aldermen, I saw last night Vocalo on the newscast last night. He is in the 36th, and he said he tried to get with the Hispanic caucus, and they said no, because he's not Latino. But he was, you know, he was trying, because he's got a lot of Latinos in his ward. And now, of course, in the 2015 election, he is a very great possibility he will not be the alderman, because the vote will indicate that there will be a Latino, probably.
Yeah, I'd be shocked if he actually wins in that district.
Because he doesn't have the kind of clout that, you know, like Burke has in his ward, where, you know, it's Alderman Burke, you're liable to get all the services you need because you've got this powerful alderman. So even if you're Latino, you might say, no, we better keep this guy. That's not the case with this guy. He's a freshman alderman.
Correct. And as far as Fioretti, of course he's mad, and he should be mad. I mean, when you look at it, the only way that they could break off and maintain the Black Caucus wards that they had was to carve out a lot of Fioretti's ward. And then that left you with pretty much the West Loop, which, when you look at the power players in Chicago, they didn't want Fioretti controlling the West Loop. And so there's no question that this is the way that his map was wrapped. It was out of logistics, but it also was out of his politics 101.
With the big elephant in the room that we don't talk about a ton, but Burke and Mel, I mean, are we ever going to see any changes with, you know, who's leading those wards there? You're laughing, of course. I know, Suzanne, I'm going to Suzanne first on this one. I mean, is this going to be a situation, they're just going to retire and off? I mean,
I think some things in life are very certain. Not many things. Taxes, death, and Alderman Mel and Alderman Burke. And I think as long as they want to be Alderman, they will be.
You know, if you're talking about, in the case of Alderman Burke, if a guy has the kind of clout that he can continue to have security for, I mean, and when you ask, what is the reason for that? Well, back when Harold Washington was running, there was a lot of concern, threats. How long ago was that? That was why that was initially, that's why he was initially assigned these people. And he still got them. I mean, he doesn't have what he did have because he reduced it down to, what, 2 now? But why does he have that? I should point out how, it was interesting how we had the Attorney General.
I was about to mention that in the shop the other day.
She gave me a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
No security.
She walked in by herself.
Yeah, right. Unbelievable.
People were asking, well, one, was she in the shop? And it was like the undertones of, did the Attorney General go to this black neighborhood? And it's like, yes, she was in the shop. Well, did she bring security with her? No, she didn't.
So to speak to that question about whether Burke and Mel are going to remain in those seats for a long time, I think you're right about your response to that. There's no question.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. If you're just now tuning in, you're listening to the Barbershop on Vocalo 89.5 FM. You can get in on this conversation. It's just not to the folks here in the shop. You can give us a call at 888-635-1112. You can also tweet the show and follow the conversation at Chicago Reporter or find us on Facebook.
And again, this is the Barbershop Show. Are we going to do our analysis? Should we continue to talk about what happened?
We can lather up the analysis. I'm taking a word from Ryan Babylon. We can start with the ROM stuff this week, with the protesting, because that's going to come up, at least in my list of likes and dislikes. You can probably guess it.
There's one more thing on the automatic map, which was kind of interesting in terms of Mayor Rahm Emanuel and how he used clout and power and influence. I think he mentioned at some point that, if you guys don't get this straight, you know, the issue of reducing the number of wards could come up again. So you might not want to do that, because a lot of you guys will be out of jobs. Essentially, he didn't say that part of it, but that's the reality.
It was implied.
It's sort of an inspiration to get it done.
Inspiration. That's a nice word choice.
Yeah.
Implied thread, inspiration.
Well, question. All right, so this is the Barbershop Show, live from Carter's Barbershop in North Lawndale until 1 o'clock this afternoon. After the break, more local news analysis. We'll share the local news headlines we like, the ones we dislike, and the ones that
Watch
let us
it.
go WTF. With that,